I am happy to welcome Dr. Vartan Akababian, who has delighted us here at the Jenks Center for many years with his music appreciation lectures. Today he will share with us his newest project, the composition of an opera. This opera, The Knave of Hearts, has been commissioned by Tufts University and was completed last December. Currently, Dr. Akababian is a member of the music theory and composition faculties at Boston University, at MIT, the Longy School of Music, the South Shore Conservatory, and the Winchester Community Music School. He directs a chamber orchestra at the Longy School of Music and is a former member of the faculty at the Boston University Academy. He was the composer in residence for the vocal ensemble Recuerdo, is that right? In Cambridge for 7 years. He teaches privately, lectures publicly, and continues to compose on commission. Our programs are presented by the Winchester Seniors Association and are supported by a grant from the John and Mary Murphy Educational Foundation. Please join me in welcoming Vartan Akababian.
Let's see how this works. I awoke this morning with very little voice, so I'm very thankful for the amplification. Those of you who have been kind enough to come to my presentations in the past, good morning, you know that normally I like to walk around and move, and that I inherited my mother's very projecting voice, but I just don't have it with me today, so forgive me. I really want to thank Connie for inviting me to speak with you all today. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate all of you very, very much making room in your schedule to come and hear whatever it is I have to say, despite the low voice. It's my belief, my supposition, that you have come today to hear about The Knave of Hearts, which is the opera that I completed and which Tufts is performing. But I know you've also come today to gain some insight into the composition process and to consider the contemporary compositional perspectives of a work in the genre of the opera. And in the process, I hope you'll have an opportunity to learn a little more about music history. I wanted to take more of an informal approach to my presentation today, much like a docent tour at the MFA. I'm sure you've all either taken them or witnessed people taking a docent tour. They're always fascinating. I love them myself. Standing either in the group or just next to the group, eavesdropping on all of the perspective, be it about art history, the personal history of the artist, the personal history of the model, maybe the history of the place that was painted, or the scene from history or Greek mythology or whatever, all the explanations. You don't necessarily come away with a completely academic understanding of everything, but you do feel much more connected with the works of art that are on the docent tour. And that's what I'm hoping to do today, is to help you feel a lot more connected with this piece of art that I have created that you will have an opportunity to see in production in 2 weeks. Opening night is 2 weeks from tonight. Ooh. I'm starting to shake. The packets there are still some packets that are being printed. They'll be coming out. Those of you who don't have them, when they come out, please make sure to raise your hand very high so that the lady who's bringing them back, I think her name is Judy, will be able to know to whom to give them. The packets contain the official invitation with performance details. And just for your information, the performances are Tuesday and Wednesday on the 23rd and 24th. They are midweek performances. They don't do them at Tufts on the weekends. And the curtain is at 8 o'clock. The performances take place at Distler Hall, which is right on the campus of Tufts University. And the admission is free. The opera itself is a production of the opera department and their activities are school-sponsored. Therefore, there's a part of the tuition of all the students at Tufts to cover the costs of this production. So please feel free to come and bring your friends, and you don't even have to call ahead for tickets. Distler Hall is a lovely facility with a lot of seating. So it'd be my pleasure to have you all there. In the packet, whether you have it in front of you or whether it comes to you in just a few minutes, there will be 5 examples to which I'll refer in the course of this presentation. You may want to take a look at it as I speak.
It's very important that we know exactly when it starts. And I thought the website gave a time of when the radio starts at 8 o'clock.
You'll have to forgive me, I was told 8 o'clock.
Okay.
And that can obviously be cleared up if there's a problem. Thank you so much. Perfect. Thank you so much.
The original's down there.
That's great. Thank you.
Oh, do you need one?
Yeah.
Here, you want me to have this? I'll run them on. You want one? Here, take this one because it says.
Thank you so much.
Anybody else?
The only point of caution that I'd like to give to everyone before I begin is that because the piece has not been performed and because the piece is to be a premiere at Tufts, and because it hasn't been recorded, I have no way to present any music from the opera to you today. So I look at this as my opportunity to whet your appetite and inform you about it, and hopefully you will be encouraged to come and hear the opera, which will be heard in its premiere performance 2 weeks from tonight. Today's presentation reveals to you the opera that I have composed from 3 perspectives: the perspective of the commission itself, the perspective of the libretto, and the perspective of the music. And I would like to begin with the commission. Keep in mind that throughout history, the bulk of music that has been written by composers has been the result of employment. Bach, for instance, was Kapellmeister at the Thomaskirche in Leipzig, and he was charged with, amongst his duties, with composing a cantata for every Sunday of the church year, so that they could cycle through the entire church year with a cantata for every Sunday. We would not have had all of that output for the church service of the Protestant church without Bach having that particular position. Haydn was the court composer of Prince Esterhazy in Eisenstadt, which is now in Austria, part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Whenever music was needed by Prince Esterhazy and his household, Haydn created it. Music publishers of the 19th century received works regularly from contracted composers such as Brahms and Chopin. They were encouraged to write music and send it to the publishers, not only for the money that the music publishers would send to them in return, but for the certainty of its publication and distribution to the masses. The most famous 20th century commissioning resulted in many ballets for the Ballet Russe. In Paris, Sergei Diaghilev was the director and was the one who was in charge of commissioning Darius Milhaud and Maurice Ravel and Claude Debussy, amongst others. And so many of the 20th century symphonic masterworks were commissioned by our own BSO. Serge Koussevitzky was the music director. In the spirit of our musical predecessors and the tradition of commission, Carol Mastro Domenico, who is the director of Tufts Opera Programs, she initiated a new commissioning project this year, specifically for one-act operas. The Knave of Hearts is a result of this first commissioning initiative. It is a one-act opera, a single scene, ranging in length 90 minutes. And a one-act opera is the operatic equivalent of a short story. There are characters, a plot, a climax, and a resolution. It's just that it's not as developed or drawn out, not to use a negative term, than a full 2, 3, or 4-act opera or more. Thank you, Richard Wagner. One-act operas are traditionally shorter in length, simpler in design, and easier to rehearse, perfect, and produce. That's what makes them very popular, especially today. Carol's intention originally was to commission a one-act opera and pair it with another one-act opera so that they would be performing 2 one-act operas. It would provide more singers with the opportunity for lead roles, involve more performers in the program, bolster the chorus of both one-act operas, for the leads of one would then be required to participate as chorus for the other. My opera ended up being 90 minutes long. Carol is only doing one opera. So I definitely went over the request of 20 to 40 minutes, 45 minutes. But Carol was thrilled at the length, and the feedback has been good so far. Carol's commission came to me with very specific guidelines. She said, I have to have a story opera. The audience and the students, who are the performers, will not turn out for a conceptual opera. We need a story. We want it to tell a story. There have to be characters and a plot. She says, I need many roles. I can't just have, like in Così fan tutte, 4 roles, 2 men, 2 women. She goes, I need as many roles as you can give me in this opera, because I have enthusiasm for the opera, and I want people to turn out for the auditions and be able to reward them with as many roles as possible. She says, I need mostly female roles. I have a limited amount of male singers that come into the program, participate, and graduate. She said, so my male roles are limited. I have tons of female roles. And on top of it, they all have to be soprano. She said you could make it a comedy or a tragedy. She says, I want no sexual situations. I thought to myself, it's opera. I want an English language libretto. My only other option would be to give you a libretto in Armenian. I don't think anybody wants that right now. She also reminded me that Distler Hall is a recital hall with no wings and no backstage, no curtain, no lighting system, but on and off, and no pit for an orchestra. So the commission came to me with many stipulations, but I have to admit, being a composer, one of the best things to be given are limitations. Because as soon as you give me the boundaries, I'll take it in the direction it needs to go, knowing to avoid and obey the boundaries. So I think I have done that. We'll see. We'll see. She insisted that nothing required complicated staging or involved lighting or costuming. And she said that it was due December 1st, come hell or high water. And if any of you know Carol Mastrodomenico, she's a lovely woman, wife, mother of 3, incredible singer, fine pedagogue, outstanding professional individual. But she will put the fear of God in you when she sets a deadline. This commission came to me April 10th. So I had less than 8 months to do it. And I knew that a lot of work wouldn't get done in the summer. I began the composing. I shouldn't say that. I began work on the libretto in May, searching for the libretto. It took a little while to find material off of which I could base the libretto. My original concept was to write my own libretto, for a scenario that had kind of a story to it. But I realized that the research I wanted to put into this particular libretto was going to be all-consuming, and that it would eat up all the time I had to really find something, finalize the libretto, and start the composing. So I figured, don't be foolish. Find something, base your libretto off of something else, and get moving on this project before you lose time and disappoint by missing your deadline. As I said, I had a choice to make between basing my libretto off of existing material or creating a new one. That tradition is strong within the opera creation tradition of opera creation. Libretti based off of other material include Monteverdi's Orpheus, the story from Greek mythology, Donizetti's Lucia de Lammermoor from a Sir Walter Scott novel, and Mark Blitzstein's 20th century Regina from The Little Foxes by Lillian Hellman. There is also a strong history of libretti created specifically for the opera. Earlier mentioned Mozart's Così fan tutte, Wagner's Die Meistersinger von Nürnberg, and Philip Glass's Einstein on the Beach. In the latter half of the 20th century, composers tended to create their own libretto in effort to distinguish operatic works from that of the American musical theater, which had risen in popularity. American musical theater productions typically, but not entirely, have libretti based on previously existing materials. A trip to the Harvard bookstore in May, combined with a lot of luck and perhaps some divine intervention, led me to a collection of one-act plays that were all in the public domain, something very important in these days of artistic rights and intellectual property rights. Had I chosen something for the base of my libretto that was somebody else's material, we would have had to gotten the rights, which can be very difficult, and or paid for the rights, which I'm not so sure Carol would have been pleased about. That can run up to thousands of dollars. So having chosen this book and found a play in it that I liked to base my libretto on, was really, really a stroke of luck because it's in the public domain. Anybody can do anything with it. It was one of 12 plays in the collection, The Knave of Hearts, the play by Louise Saunders, an American playwright from the 30s. It fit the bill. It had many characters, many whose gender could be switched for this work to create more female roles. I have switched the character from Louise Saunders' original play, the stage manager to that of a female, the chefs to 2 female pastry chefs, the children I have condensed into one character and combined it with the character of the lady-in-waiting, Ursula. The pages I have switched from boy roles to girl roles. I've taken a lot of roles that had the ability to switch gender and switched them. So to comply with Carol's request, lots of female roles. It was a story opera, light in subject, well-structured, well-written, with clever dialogue, and with an interesting underlying populist theme. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it. Populism was a movement in art, literature, and I suppose in music, if it involved text, coming through the 20s, 30s, even into the 40s. And it was the lauding of the common man, kind of the American version of the communist philosophy, the lauding of the common man, and the exposing of people in power, people with wealth, people in control, as being frivolous and unworthy. And so the play really does that. You have the queen, you have the king, you have his chancellor, you have even the lady in waiting. She's not. They're all characters in question. But the knave, the lowest character in the play, the knave is truly noble in this play. I confess that I was not immediately taken with this play. It was not love at first sight. But I rapidly became aware of the numerous qualities in this work of dramatic literature, of the work's potential to be the perfect starting point for my libretto. And the longer I entertained the idea of writing my opera based on this play, the more I relished it and the more thankful I was for having found it. I was also acutely aware that I was under a strict deadline to complete this work and that there would have been no hope of achieving anything but a dismal failure by tarrying with the decision on the material from which to base my libretto. And so I began. I first began by organizing the libretto and cutting the original material. There was far too much material for me to include in the opera. You think 90 minutes is long. I've cut out about 20% of the play. Removal of the dialogue was first. I had to find dialogue that was superfluous to the forwarding of the plot and get rid of it. An example of this, unfortunately, because the original play is very clever and it would be very cute on stage, the king and his chancellor have almost a husband and wife bickering back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. No, you didn't. Kind of a humorous relationship. Unfortunately, I had to cut that out. For me, it was too much of an aside for the plot. I want to turn to example 1. Example 1 just shows you 3 pages of the original script from the Louise Saunders play. And I have, these are Xeroxes from my original copy of that I took my pen and got rid of lines. So if you turn, there are 3 consecutive pages, you can see in those 3 pages how much of the original play I have gotten rid of, just in those 3 pages. I have to admit, there are other pages later in the play that are almost completely intact in the libretto, but these pages were filled with what I had to deem as superfluous dialogue, and I got rid of it. So that's all the purpose of those pages, is just to show you how I went through and cut it. You can also see where I made delineations for the section to section. No one can write, nor can they rehearse, more importantly, an opera that is front to back one huge piece of music. To rehearse something that is 90 minutes long would be almost inconceivable. You'd have to break it up in sections. So I chose to break the libretto up into 12 sections. And I believe these 3 pages indicate sections 3, 4, 5, and 6. You can see where I said, here is a place where the music could stop, and we could have a small little pause, and then the next section could begin. The next thing for me to do was to attend to the inclusion of arias and duets into the libretto. The libretto itself contained very little monologue and soliloquy, which are the 2 types of theatrical literature that can be turned into an aria. It has to be someone speaking by themselves for a long time, as in a monologue, or somebody off to the side of the stage reminiscing about something or talking about a love or something like that, that becomes an aria. So the play had very little of that. I had to then find the points and create where the arias were going to go. I also had to make sure, because Carol wanted a lot of roles, that everybody had an aria, that I've got stuff for everybody to sing that is ensemble work, but also where they could shine on stage, where their parents would be. very excited. In the process of creating the arias in the text, I also found opportunities to expand the text. Another reason to make cuttings in the text, because if you take the text that Louise Saunders gave you and then just expand it without cutting anything, we're going to be there all night, maybe even all week. So I had to somehow cut and then allow the medical analogy. My father is a physician, my mother is a surgical nurse, they both are retiring. Like sutures, I had to cut out stuff and then figure out how to suture it together so that there was still a flow in the libretto, and hopefully not abandon too much the prose style of Louise Saunders. I wanted to make sure that everything was still smart, clever, well-structured, because her original play was like that. If we go to example 2, actually, forgive me. Example 2 will give you the outline of the opera itself. 12 sections and their subsections. Involved in it also are the characters who sing in each subsection and what kind of pieces primarily are involved. Recitative, which is the setting of dialogue, regular dialogue to music, and then aria. Arietta means a small one, or duet. Aria is the longer song that everyone's used to hearing in an opera. And it also tells you the approximate duration of each section and subsection of the opera. Moving on to the example number 3, you will see the shaping, editing, and expansion of the opening monologue. I'm going to join you in my packet. So on the first page of example 3, you have the opening monologue by the stage manager. This is how the opera opens. There is no, there is no overture for this opera. I chose to use the introduction to the opera that Louise Saunders had created, and that to create an overture on top of the introduction, I felt was redundant. So the opera opens with the stage manager coming out, "Ladies and gentlemen, you are about to hear the truth of an old legend," etc. If you turn the page, you will have the first section, section 1, out of the libretto, where I have eliminated much of the stage directions. And here you have it. "Ladies and gentlemen, gentlemen and ladies, you are about to hear the truth of a legend that has persisted wrongly through the ages. The truth that, until now, has been hid behind the embroidered curtain of rhyme. It is the truth about the Knave of Hearts, who was no knave, but a very hero indeed." This is close to what Louise Saunders originally wrote, but I have embellished so to be able to set it logically to music. You can see that this original, from the page prior, chunk of monologue now has been separated in the libretto, double-spaced, correct? And that the lines are short. It's not like strung one right after the other, like it is printed in the play. I have done this to remind myself while I'm composing that this is a logical statement. I can separate "ladies and gentlemen" from "gentlemen and ladies." However, I should not separate the words. You are about to hear the truth of a legend that has persisted wrongly throughout the ages. So every line that you see that I've separated, I've reminded myself this can stand on its own, or should stand on its own, to help the text come across to the audience. You will also notice that we have on this page of the introduction, we have a first section, and then there's a space. Before the words, the truth, you will agree, gentlemen and most honored ladies, the truth is rare. It is only the quiet, unimpassioned things of nature that seem to be what they are. This is separated from the first part because it's my decision in the libretto. I'm going to change the music here. So I have something for this opening, but I'm going to change the music. Next, you have a section that's even indented. That was my own indication to myself. This is going to be an arietta, a little aria. Clouds rolled in massy radiance against the blue, etc., etc. Louise Saunders' text really lent itself to singing. I was so fortunate to find this play. As you go through the other pages, pages 2 and page 3, you can see where there are other sections of this, where there will be changes in the music. And I can guarantee you when we get to the last section that begins, and so, ladies and gentlemen and ladies, in the name of retribution and for the sake of justice, etc., that I shall be returning to the same music that came at the very beginning, because it was the way that the stage manager was speaking to the audience, gathering them, encouraging them, welcoming them. So I wanted to show you that as part of the libretto. If we go to the next example, we have aria creation. The king arrives on stage after marching in with his court and starts his dialogue. You see the sound of trumpets increases and cries of "make way for the king." 2 heralds come in and stand on either side of the door. The King of Hearts enters. And then the King of Hearts, who, if we were pronouncing it properly in French, might be King Pontdeville, but Louise Saunders insists on a childish and silly interpretation of that name, pronunciation of that name, Pontdeville. So I don't want you to come to the opera and think, what's wrong with Agababian? He doesn't know how to set French. So specifically in the cast of characters put by Louise Saunders, pronounced Pontdeville. So, and she's obviously making fun of him. So here you have his original, this is the first thing he would say in the play. Lords and ladies of the court, this is an important moment in the history of our reign. And I realized everybody's going to know it's the king, but we need a little more information about the king. So I figured, what a great idea. I'm going to write this really, and he's a fool, I have to tell you. I'm going to write this pompous, silly little aria that he sings at his arrival. Turn the page. Lords and ladies of the court, it is I, your king, Pontdeville. And everyone in the chorus, all hail, King Pontdeville. All is well now, I am here, never fear. So go ahead, applaud and cheer. I mean, it really gives the impression right off the bat that this king is, forgive me, the horse's back end. The middle section of it, I was very pleased with, I have to say. My name throughout the world is known. My royal robes are all hand sewn. My court is gayest in the land. Yes, you may kiss my royal hand. My favorite dance is the bourrée, and I play checkers every day. My sphere of influence is large. My kingdom is fortunate that I'm in charge. I mean, I had to create something that let everybody know what a pompous fool he was from the get-go, and here you have it. Please note that at the conclusion, turn the page, at the conclusion of this aria is his monologue that now is set kind of as recitative. Lords and ladies of the court, this is an important moment in the history of our reign. You've already heard this. I'm now moving on to the libretto. There's one other example I'd like to share with you, and that's a duet creation. My mother is a big fan of opera, and she has always said that her favorite parts in any opera are when you get duets, trios, quartets, quintets. She goes crazy, she loves it. Her favorite, there's an ensemble, I think it's a trio from Strauss's Der Rosenkavalier that she is crazy about. And And I happen to love the sextet out of Lucia de Lammermoor. I think it's amazing. So I figured, well, I've got some ensemble work where the chorus is all like, all hail the king, but I don't really have any duets going on here. I better like do something. So I said, what a great idea. Let's create sympathetic, but also kind of foolish, silly characters in the pastry chefs. So I created a duet for the pastry chefs, the same way that I created a solo for the king. They come out and they sing this duet and you understand their characters immediately, rather than waiting to see how the play turns out to understand their characters. You know right away, they're sympathetic, they're funny, and you like them. So this is part of the duet that they sing to the audience. Two pastry chefs are we, two professional pastry chefs are we. And then they go back and forth. Before the dawn we always rise to bake our cookies, cakes, and pies. With a quality we just won't, no we won't, compromise. Two pastry chefs are we, two professional pastry chefs are we. The second verse, there's more to this, but I didn't want to belabor it. Two pastry chefs are we, two professional pastry chefs are we. One of them says, I'm a ninja with a rolling pin. The other says, my shortbread is just wafer thin. The other says, one taste of my flan and your head will spin. And the other replies, and my fruit crisp brings a special glow. The other says, what a glow to the skin. Two pastry chefs are we, two professional pastry chefs are we. It was a way to create characters that you knew were serious pastry chefs and took themselves too seriously, but were still fun and comical characters. So I have concentrated for the most part in this presentation on the libretto, primarily because I have a feeling that may be something that you are the least exposed to. The other reason is that I have no music to play for you. I shall talk about the music, but I have much less to say about the music. It is nonetheless, I think, important and interesting, but that thus ends our packet of information. There's one last thing I want to talk about. I neglected this. It was very important to include humor in the libretto. This is supposed to be a comic opera. And most of my friends from childhood and adolescence, and maybe even early college, would profess that I was very, very funny. But as I have entered my mature years, let's put it that way, I have found myself more and more serious, appreciating humor in others. I was a little nervous when charged with the creation of an opera that was going to turn out to be comic. I was wondering, do I have it in me to do something like that? My own compositional and artistic intents and bends are usually for the serious. So I had to replace one-liners in the libretto that when spoken garner laughs easily with arias and arietas that can elaborate on that humorous concept. There's an example of that. Violetta, the proposed Queen of Hearts, because she's not Queen of Hearts yet, Violetta wants to, she's got to pass this test, she's got to make the tarts, they have to be perfect, or else she will be banished. And if she's banished, everyone's thinking, banished, how silly is that? But I elaborated, and she has a whole aria about what happens to banished people. My mother has read the libretto, that's her favorite, she claims. I decided that the inclusion of a rhyme scheme in the lyric of arias and duets would help lighten it and make it a little more clever and a little more fun. The example of that would have been the pastry chef's duet. I also figured that elaborating on the humor that is extant in the original text, meaning taking it and taking it one step further, would be useful. The knave at one point sings about his own wife, who evidently is a fine cook herself. But he confesses that he has married her for her cooking and not for her looks. So I took that a little far. My mother says, weren't you a little mean? I said, no, it's supposed to be funny. About the music. As we've already discussed, there's no room for an orchestra. Carol said, I want a piano score. And I have to confess, with the quickness of the deadline, I praised God that it was just a piano score. If I had to write a full orchestral score, I'm not so sure I would be standing in front of you. It was everything I could do to write this piece in 3 months, which is how long I worked on it. The piano score is obviously easier to rehearse. It's more reliable in performance. You have one person who knows the piano part, who's playing it, rather than a whole bunch of student musicians who may get sick or, God forbid, have a family emergency and just don't show up, and now you're missing your oboe. So it's more reliable. And like I said, there's no space in Distler Hall for an orchestra. I've already confessed to you that there's no overture for this piece. Composing it in the 21st century, composing it in the 21st century, I had an artistic decision to make. Do I want this piece, this opera, to be a composition of atonal character, which is the status, the state of the art? Everything is atonal. No more scales, no more chords, no more harmonies that you can hear and understand. Everything is abstract. Do I want this piece to be like this, or do I want it to be more tonal? And I made my decision. And I made my decision based primarily on the libretto. I said, this libretto is a charming story. Absolutely charming. The characters, even the ones that aren't so nice, they're not so smart, they're charming characters. They're still lovable. And if I were to take this light, humorous dialogue and aria text, and set it in a very contemporary style, I promise you, it would only come out to sound psychotic. So I said, I'm going to abandon this hope, either of mine, my colleagues, or the audience, that this is going to be cutting edge new music. It's not. But I can guarantee, and I say this with most humility, I can guarantee that the music that is in this opera is completely appropriate for the characters, for the arias, for the text, for the story. And I think if you get a chance to come and see it in 2 weeks, I hope, but I think you'll agree. So I agreed in my own head on tonality, because tonality is more appropriate to the libretto, a simpler story, like humor. It's a spin-off of a nursery rhyme, for God's sake. And it's not a serious subject matter in any way. Also, I thought about the students who would be performing this. It's more suitable to their level of musicianship, as well as to their expectation. If they've been doing Rossini, if they've been doing Mozart, if they've been doing who's the one who did the Tales of Offenbach. They've been doing Offenbach. They are used to and they enjoy performing opera from the literature that comes from the Common Practice period. Something that is tonal, something that expresses melody, something where the harmonies function and can lead people to conclusions about what's being sung because of the harmonic progressions. I figured the students are going to do better at it, they're going to like it better. And I know from experience, whatever the performing musicians like better, they perform better. I also have to confess, tonality is my natural language of composition. I've been schooled to write atonal music as well, especially in my master's and doctorate. And I have dabbled in it, hopefully successfully. But it is not my choice. That does not mean that I want to write something that sounds like a 1950s rock and roll bebop song, or I don't want to write something that sounds exactly like Mozart. But I purposely chose these genres and styles because I think that combining it with the libretto aids in the humor and the joy of performing as well as listening to it. As I said, the advantages of a tonal score are it's more tuneful, more enjoyable, more memorable, and less exhausting to listen to. Those of you who've been to new music concerts, you know, you sit through a 20-minute string quartet that is abstract, you're exhausted at the end of listening to it. There's nothing wrong with it, please don't get me wrong. I love that stuff too, but it's exhausting. And I knew this piece was gonna end up being long from the beginning. So I figured, don't do this to the audience. Don't kill your audience. And once again, a tonal score is easier for amateur or young professional vocalists to learn, perfect, perform, and interpret. Disadvantages to a tonal score. It is against the audience's expectation and judgment of new music. A lot of people come to something that is newly composed and they say to themselves, I can't wait to hear this. And if it smacks of anything that they've heard before, a major triad, do, mi, sol, they think, oh, what a sellout. So I took on that gamble and I said, call it what you will, it is what it is. And it's not a sellout. Any composer who composes in a tonal medium in the 21st century automatically sets himself up for the fortunate and unfortunate comparison with other tonal composers. That sounds just like Gershwin. I've been listening to Gershwin all my life. Shouldn't he have influenced me? Or, that sounded just like Mozart. Did you steal that? No. I've played and analyzed, not all, but many, many, many Mozart's sonatas, piano concerti, etc. Why shouldn't they influence my work? In my opinion, a tonal score would have been too heavy-handed for this type of lighthearted material. It could prove to be unsuccessful due to the inappropriate match of libretto and musical type. And like I said, I think it might just sound a bit psychotic. There is humor in the music, direct humor, sudden changes of tempo, especially after a funny one-liner. Frenetic energy in the music, like our cartoon music that we're all used to seeing. The Baker's Duet has a ritornello, which introduces each verse. It's like a little introduction that is cuckoo crazy. And it's so Carol hopefully can have them chopping and cutting and flour flying about the stage. It's to mimic the crazy actions, encourage crazy behavior on stage. Clunker chords, you all know what those are. When somebody would just go up to the piano and like, sit down. That's what it sounds like, and that's the effect of it. So there are clunker chords in it too. They're supposed to make you laugh. Equating simple music with simple ideas. So Violetta, the proposed Queen of Hearts, at some point decides that she's going to go change her dress. That I'm leaving right now, I'm changing my dress. She sings this quick little arietta, how wonderful to change my dress. I love to change my dress. Isn't it a great thing to change my dress? I mean, not much upstairs. So I made it really, really simple. Chuck, 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 chuck. Of course, because this simple aria, this simple, almost caricatured aria is going to work well with this clearly vapid idea that she has. I'm just gonna go change my dress now. So that aids in bringing humor. The opposite is also true. Contrasting something that is really kind of distasteful to discuss, like the beheading of the knave, with, again, a nice little cutie aria sung by the Queen and the King. Like, let's cut his head off, let's cut his head off. I mean, it aids in the humor to make it chuck, chuck, chuck. It aids in the humor of it. The last aspect in the music of humor that I chose to create was the use of the spoken word during the music. Some lines of humor especially just should not be sung. They need to be spoken. And they're so much more hilarious when they're spoken. There is never a period in my opera where there is not music going on. It is not a Singspiel. It is not an operetta where we break up the musical numbers with dialogue. But there are certain lines of spoken dialogue that will happen during the music, which the performers now have a chance to use inflection of the spoken voice rather than the pitch of the song to convey the humor. I think you'll find it fun. I also use certain musical reference for the humor. The character of Ursula, who is the lady in waiting, I have made her kind of a saucy, maybe kind of naughty girl. And so all of her music is in very much a 20th century genre. She comes on stage to a boogie woogie. She sings a song that is to the accompaniment of stride piano like Scott Joplin. I've given her the 20th century genres that are more popular, that represent a lower intellect, but a more fun character. Contrasting that, I have used the Polonaise for the entrance march. A Polonaise is typically a march in 3. Most of our marches are in 2, right? Or in 4, 1, 2, 1, 2. But a Polonaise is in 3, 1, 2, 3. It's a very regal march, and as the name would imply, it's from Poland originally. And so I used that for the King's March. I wanted to use something that exuded a very formalness that, of course, then through the choreography and the blocking could then maybe even be a bit pompous. The third beat is open for interpretation with tripping or hiccups or bumping into people. I think we'll see what Carol does. I have to confess I've not been to any of the rehearsals. The rehearsals for this opera are in direct conflict with my work teaching at various schools. And I couldn't possibly reschedule all that teaching to start attending rehearsals. I'll be going to the final dress rehearsal with my parents, and that will be it. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Carol and her team have put this opera together. But I must confess, I believe that Carol and Thomas is the music director, are consummate professionals, and I trust them fully with my work, and I'm looking forward to it. The last part of the music that I wanted to make sure that I focused on was maintaining high energy in the music. Music that has high energy tends to promote in the audience that hears it and in the people who are singing it energy. And when you have energy to receive something, you're more engaged, but you're also more excited by it. It's fun. When you hear the final movement of a Mozart piano concerto, this is the fast movement, this is the rondo, it's like hooray, it's here, and it's joyous and joyful because the tempo is big, the tempo is up. So I tried to focus energetic music for this type of lighthearted material to maintain positive energy and humor. In humble conclusion, because I have gone on and on and on about this piece, and I am thrilled to be able to share this with you. Thank you so much. For 3 months, I was literally sequestered in my home. I would get up in the morning, compose. I would go to BU to teach. I would come home for lunch. I would compose. I would go off to either Winchester, here in Winchester to teach, or the South Shore Conservatory in Hingham to teach. I would come home at night, I would have my supper, and I would compose. And I would wake up the next morning, and I would do it all over again. But this time I would go to MIT. Tuesdays and Thursdays were MIT. Monday, Wednesday, Fridays at BU. That was the only difference in my day. Saturdays I would go to Longy. I would come home, I would compose for sometimes up to 5 or 8 hours on Saturday, and then up to 5 to 8 or 9 hours on Sunday. And this was every day from the week after Labor Day to the point that I turned it in. One section was not finished on December 1st. It was the latter part of section 12. And I told Carol, I said, you can have everything on the 1st, but that last section, because it's not done. And I don't want to just, I want it to make sure that it's good. And she says, that's fine. You're giving me more than enough. The score is over 300 pages long. You're giving me more than enough to work with while you finish that last section. So I'm thrilled to be able to share this with you. My friends are sick of hearing about it. In conclusion, I would like to, I shall be asking and answering 3 most commonly asked questions from friends, family, and peers regarding this project. And then I shall open the floor up to all of you for your questions. And once again, I most humbly thank you for your interest and attention to my presentation this morning. My first question from my friends and family to myself What has been my role in the rehearsal process of this work? I've already confessed that to you. I've left it alone. Zilch, exactly. The second question, what have I learned from doing this project? Number one, thank God, that's part of it. Thank God I learned that I can do it. And that in itself, like somebody who runs the marathon, this coming Monday is Marathon Monday, like somebody who runs the marathon, they come at the end of the line, and whether they beat their time or didn't beat their time, whether they arrive with the pack or long straggling after the pack, they say to themselves, I did it. I ran the Boston Marathon. Okay, I've written a 90-minute opera. I'm psyched about that. I proved to myself that I can do it, which is great, because that means I can now entertain ideas of doing it again. And that is, the second thing that I have learned is that it is all-consuming and potentially exhausting. But I liken it to my 3 months, maybe to 1/3 of what you ladies have gone through with your childbearing. So I can't even imagine what another 6 months of intensity would be like. And if you'll notice, the invitation even treats it kind of like a birth. It's an opera, not it's a boy or it's a girl, it's an opera. I also have to confess, I cannot wait to do it again. I'm very pleased with my product, not meaning to sound anything but sincere. And I'm so looking forward to it, and I really hope you folks can come. I have one last question that people have posed to me. What would I do differently in my next opera? And I have to confess, the first thing is that I would not base it on a play. And if I did base it on a play, I would rewrite the entire thing myself. Because a play, especially like Louis Saunders' play, comes with amazing dialogue that you don't want to cut. It's very, very difficult to cut the dialogue of a play. So it's better to just write it yourself and to keep it as lean and plot-driven as you can do. I would, as I said, write my own libretto or base the libretto on a story, but not the too literal use of the story. Again, too many words. I would negotiate with my commissioner, and more importantly with myself, about the roles to ensure a more balanced work of art at the end. I now have a 90-minute opera, a major work in my portfolio that is quite top-heavy. Got a lot of female roles in that. Now you could transpose some of the female roles back to male roles, just transpose everything down an octave and assign it. It can be done. I am not regretful nor resentful of the limitations imposed upon me by the commission, but I am aware that it's very much designed for the Tufts program, not necessarily for the consumption and production of other opera companies. And also, I might try to negotiate harder with the commissioner, Carol, to not give me a deadline so close to Christmas and the end of the 2 semesters at the universities where I teach, because that really made things kind of hairy-scary, helter-skelter. So that's what I've learned, and I shall now entertain your questions, if there are any. Thank you very much. Yes, please.
It is indeed unfortunate that we can't hear the score. Did you use repeated melodies for different characters when they came back that had a familiar little...
That is an excellent question. It is an excellent question, and it was not outside of my considerations every time I went to write something. But the most important thing, first of all, is that you write music that is supporting of, representative of, and well-matched to the intention of the text that is being delivered, if that makes sense. So, where I could, I have used some repetition. It's also a one-act opera, which doesn't allow, it's not that long, so that you need to have a main theme running through it. The play had a very simple trajectory of plot. It takes place in one afternoon in the pastry kitchen of the castle. So it wasn't like I had the main character in various parts of his or her life going through similar situations where I could reintroduce a theme to bring that back. That concept was developed by Wagner, his light motif, L-E-I-T, a light motif, where there was music, specific music, to represent each of the characters. I thought about doing that, and I believe that there really wasn't enough material for every character that wasn't plot-driven to allow me to do it. I do have a reprise, just so you know, meaning I bring it back at the end of the opera of the pastry chef's duet with new lyric. So that, thank you, that's an excellent question. Yes, please.
Yes, what happens when you have someone who's done the music, trying to fit it with material that someone else has written? And you did it all, but I mean, what happens?
It's an excellent question, and I would say fairly 60% of my libretto is Louise Saunders. Easily 60 of it is directly Louise Saunders, primarily because I loved her text, I loved her dialogue, I loved her words. My mother even confessed, don't tell her I said this, that there were a couple of words she had to look up in the dictionary, and she has an excellent vocabulary. She had to look up, I had to look up a couple of words too. I mean, just the intellectual level of this original material appealed to me, and I didn't want to lose that quality. It's a very, very good question. As you go along composing, even from your own libretto, which could be directly based on the original material, sometimes you have to change musically what you want to do to fit the words, and sometimes you have to alter the words to fit what you want musically. You have to be able to kind of straddle both lanes, so to speak, and not just be true to the words at the sacrifice of the music, and definitely not be true to the music at the sacrifice of the words. Excuse me, it's a constant back and forth.
Some of those operas, they list the person who did the libretto first. I mean, it's like two people collaborating.
And that, interestingly enough, is the most important word. It's a collaboration. They're working together. And when Mozart went to Da Ponte and said, I need to lengthen this line for the musical reason, I can't say because I wasn't there, but most likely Da Ponte said, do it. Do what you need. And if it really were against what Da Ponte wanted, he would have said, please don't do that. Can't you fix it some other way? And most likely Mozart was like, sure, I've got 5 other ways to do it. I just wanted to do it this way. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
You mentioned the importance of this being a story opera, not a concept opera.
Mm-hmm.
Could you give me some examples in concept operas?
I thank you. It's a good question. I think many 20th century operas are concept operas. Well, you know what? I don't want to be put on the spot because I did not prepare a musicological discussion today, even though I did do some research into finding some examples for you. I would like to say in my head that, for instance, Philip Glass's Einstein on the Beach is a conceptual opera. I don't believe there's much story to it. I think you've got the main character kind of singing about his life in an abstract setting with not many other characters interacting with him. Please don't hold me to that, though. There are many, many conceptual operas out there. If you'll allow the analogy, because there is some crossover from the American musical theater and opera, or at least styles of opera. The American musical, a chorus line, is a great example of a conceptual show in this, for the intents and purposes of our discussion, a conceptual opera. There's no real plot. You have a bunch of characters coming to sing their experiences. Either they're literally auditioning or they're sharing life experiences. And then at the end of the show, the cast is chosen, the rest of them are ushered off, and there you have it. The characters themselves don't really interact. There's no real plot line. I just thought of one that BU produced a few years ago, Postcard from Morocco. A Postcard from Morocco. It's a bunch of characters who, I interpreted it, are dead. who have come, who at one point in their life came through a train station and are waiting for various trains, and they all sing about what they did in their lives and what happened to them, but none of them really interact. That's my idea of a conceptual opera. Everybody's singing, there are arias, there's recitative, there are concert numbers that involve the ensemble, but there is not necessarily a plot. Yes?
If I can ask another
Please.
question about music history. You can a lot say about that you're a part of a tradition in music of commissioned work. But my understanding of the history of opera is that most operas were not commissioned. They were composed hoping to make money from a career.
It's very, sorry, go ahead.
I'll throw in two questions in one, I might. So I'd be interested in your comment on that, and you may be reluctant to do this, but I'm wondering if you could relate your, were there any, well, I guess we know Wagner began his career by composing an opera for each of the three major traditions of his time, Italian, German, and French. So I'm wondering if you had any models historically, such as even Gilbert and Sullivan.
Allow me to address your second question first. When I was an undergraduate at the University of Michigan, they have a Gilbert and Sullivan production society that every semester puts on one heck of a fantastic Gilbert and Sullivan production. Being a student, I would volunteer to usher for these productions, which meant I didn't have to pay the $15, $20, whatever, which back then was a lot of money. I hate to confess. And I saw almost every single Gilbert and Sullivan production, even during the summer sometimes. I had cousins who were in them. And I love Gilbert and Sullivan. I find them to be clever and musically satisfying and so entertaining. I love them. So I would like to say maybe you will find some Gilbert and Sullivan in my opera. Not lifted, but the influence of Gilbert and Sullivan. As far as the traditions of high opera, I have studied high opera to teach high, meaning high French opera, high German opera, high Italian opera, not the common Singspiel, and I don't mean Mozart, I'm talking about not musical theater, I'm talking about high opera, serious opera, and comic as well, opera buffa as well, the things that are part of the repertoire. I have studied these in order to lead classes in them. I'm not a singer anymore. I used to study voice and had a church job for a couple of years and sang with choirs, but I don't sing anymore. I've never sung in anything but a musical theater production. But by studying them and learning about them, the tricks of the trade that are extant in these particular pieces that you study filter their way into your work and your music. My work is hardly comparable to something of Wagner's. Hardly. And I'll be the first to confess that. But also, Wagner didn't set the Knave of Hearts, I did. So it's different. It's different. But excellent, excellent questions. Excellent questions. Anyone else? I know that we're going to end up concluding. Thank you. The opera is the 23rd and the 24th of Tufts. And to my Armenians in the audience, I apologize for it being on the 24th of April. The 24th of April is the annual commemoration of the commencement of the genocide perpetrated against the Armenians by the Turkish government in 1915. And so April 24th is a day where you go to church or you protest at the State House. You don't go and have your opera performed, but these dates were not in my control. So Nerohuchun, that's Armenian for pardon. I beg of you. It's the 23rd and 24th of April. It is a Tuesday and a Wednesday, 2 weeks from tonight, 2 weeks from tomorrow. And as far as I know, sir, curtain is at 8 o'clock. I might caution everybody to just contact the school and make sure that it doesn't happen earlier. But I believe
I
it's
think I
8
went
o'clock.
to, I went to a website. I went to the Tufts website, and I think it said 7:30 or 7.
Well, then I'm so sorry. Yeah, I encourage everybody, including myself, so I'm not late to my own performance. Thank you all very, very much. I wish you a good afternoon. Thank you.